Greetings, my fellow freedom lovers and sovereign thinkers. This is LL3's newest podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful swampy makers of South Florida, and today's date is Saturday, January 19th, 2019. Thanks for tuning in, folks. This is just another day in South Florida, a little bit windy, and I'm in the heart of downtown Fort Lauderdale once again. Outside as usual, it's just my nature, perhaps. Yeah, and I'd like to thank some of the folks out there from Zimbabwe trying to share the information on my podcast. It was really nice of them to do that. And of course, look up hashtag this flag. And I noticed the pastor got arrested for treason. He's supposed to be remanded in January 31st of this year, which I find it very relevant because what's been happening over there is more actually the certain criminal elements in the government of that nation are considered tyrants. They should be indicted for that particular charge. It's just another example of political prisoners. This is happening around the world. So you folks out there, please put your thoughts and prayers and strong moral support and stand on your principles that tyranny will not be tolerated in Zimbabwe and everyone else around the world, because this is very essential. The one world order wants to lock us down into their tyrannical plantation. And that's the truth, my friends. And I'm not afraid to speak my mind in this area. Another thing too, looks like I checked out this X22report.com in reference to the shutdown, the big federal government shutdown, and of course there's a claim, like QAnon, observe responsibly on that, to be precise. There may a statement, even from the gentleman from that station, from that site, made a statement about the whole thing. If it goes 30 days, President Trump may have that power to tell people to start laying off individuals. It's like a way of certain area of quote-unquote draining the swamp. And I understand that what he's doing, and I'm not an individual who's a Trump worshiper or a Trumpster, with all due respect. But one thing you got to really look at, government waste has been going on for a very long time, and many of the millennials have inherited this disaster. And according to the book, Government Racket, Washington Waste from A to Z, by Martin Gross, I read this years ago, and the main objective is only 10% of these organizations benefit the people. The 90% goes to bureaucratic red tape. A lot of pork, a lot of material things, to be precise. So this whole area, we need to really start to go and clean house. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of folks in these government agencies are great people. Many of it is absolutely 100% unconstitutional. Like the Transportation Security Agency, TSA. Many of the libertarians called it, what it stands for, thousands standing around. The airports don't really need them. And the fact is, these particular institutions are run by municipalities, city or county. Fort Lauderdale Airport, for example, is created by the people of Broward County. So we don't really need them. We can evict them and put in individuals with greater experience and more fiscally responsible, with great work ethic. And even those folks in the TSA who are very good at what they do can, if that happens, start shopping, start networking with these entities as soon as possible. You have to prepare yourself. That's for everyone else in these illegal departments. You can add the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, Explosives as well. They are 100% illegal, trying to tell people what kind of firearms you can have. They can decide what's legal, what's not. That's totally propaganda to the core. And to be very frank, I recall watching this one video for the JPFO, how the ATF failed the test. And it was on a 308 and it was like, and they used multiple brands of 308 bullets from different brand companies, and the agent made a claim it was a fully automatic, semi-automatic to a fully automatic. In reality, he used 3 rounds and only 2 shot out, and he was arguing and telling the gunsmith that was about, the gunsmith was telling him it could be malfunctional. Well, that's your opinion. Well, they actually taken the initiative to demonstrate by disassembling that particular firearm, and the coil was corroding. If it would have gotten worse, it would have backfired on the shooter, the person that was shooting it. And the ATF agent didn't know what to do. So he was totally speechless. That's one of those areas, my friends, you have to really look at the bigger picture. So to be very honest, I don't really feel sorry for a lot of these federal employees that can't get work, can't be working, or can't get paid. I don't. I'm not, and don't get me wrong, some of them are very good people as well. And this is why I look at it. You want to start trickling down? Weed out the bodies and put the ones in that are very productive. And that's the way to start. That's the way to start things, get things better, and downsizing the federal government. And that's how I see it. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of these shutdowns have been happening multiple times in the past presidential administrations. Now they want to blame everything on President Trump. And don't get me wrong, people that know me pretty damn well, I have criticized Trump on a good amount of his actions. However, if you're going to scapegoat him on this, then that's pretty ludicrous, because the truth of the matter is, folks, if you read Article 1, Section 7 of the U.S. Constitution, who holds the purse? Congress. Period. No ends, ifs, or buts. So, speaking of this, I'm going to talk about what's been happening, about nullification and decentralization and all that good stuff. So, I want to be hitting it off right now from 10th Amendment Center. It's called The Resurgent States of America, and it came out today. It's by Jackson Pemberton. And its category is History, Nullification, and Strategy. And it's pretty cool. It says Resurgent States of America, the power not delegated by the United States Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states and respectfully or the people. That's the 10th Amendment. So as it reads here, the United States of America has become a misnomer. In 1776, the words state and nation were synonyms. The USA could have been named the United Nations of America or the UNA. After pushing the British off their shores, the colonies became independent nations. But they usually call themselves states. The founders' goal was to create the federation to these nations, a political cooperative that would have the advantage of a large nation presenting a single face to the world. The first attempt was under the Confederacy, under the Articles of Confederation, and each state kept their national sovereignty as they desired. With the lessons learned from the initial experiment, they wrote the Constitution intent upon creating a permanent republic. The new USA was to be just a short step from the Confederacy, just far enough to give the new national government adequate authority to overcome the shortfalls of their first attempt. So the Constitution delegated jurisdiction to the United States government only in those areas required. It was careful to spell out exactly what that jurisdiction was. Then the first 10 amendments were added just to be sure that were clear restrictions on the powers given. For example, the Constitution doesn't mention land, water, mining, labor, marriage, and gender to eliminate all about. It specifically denied authority over guns and religion in the first, second amendments. The state and their political subdivisions were to address all these matters if need be. The question is one of one jurisdiction. The 10th Amendment, although very clearly state, is probably the amendment most frequently violated by our federal legislature. It reads thus: the power is not delegated to the United States government by the Constitution, nor prohibited to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. As a people, we have lost that constitutional vision of our political pioneers, and now USA could as well mean the United Super Counties of America. That is pretty cute when you read that. States' rights are sovereign human rights. We are born into this wonderful system that was intended to protect our rights, but most of our lives and die and vote without understanding has protected freedom better than any other system. So we can keep asking the federal government to solve more problems and thus to get bigger and bigger, and is only too happy to comply as bureaucrats to build their kingdoms and budgets while assuming more and more jurisdiction. Then we complain that the government is way too big. Go figure! To protect each individual citizen's individuality, the Constitution divides the powers of government horizontally, executive, legislative, and judicial, and vertically. The vertical dividers are the 10th Amendment and divisions of states, counties, and cities. Addressing issues at the lowest possible level of the government was the idea. Keep government close to home in the lowest possible jurisdiction. It fits nicely to keep your friends close and your enemies closer, doesn't it? The states were to be a primary protectors of our rights at the federal level, so they perceive equal representation in the Senate. Senators gain their office by action on their state governments, not their people. State governments select them, and they serve them at the pleasure of those state governments. The 17th Amendment changed all that. With this ratification, Americans elected senators by a popular vote. They effectively converted the Senate into the House of Representatives. Big money knew it. It would be much easier to line its pockets if they only had to sway public opinion, so they got behind it and made it happen. Ain't that the truth? God bless. All hail to George Soros, Haim Sabin, and Sheldon Adelson, just to name a few. The delegation of your rights sidebar shows how the amendment transformed the system into a purely democratic process. The 17th Amendment not only removed the control of the states had upon the federal government, but also caused to influence cities and counties as well. The two houses of representatives, the state and house, now dictate policy to the states. They have purchased obedience by giving them federal tax revenues in exchange for their submission. There is no sense to any of this unless you are a power consolidator. It is easy to get lost in the details of this huge, complex thing we call government. But at its core, its only justifiable purpose of government is to protect the citizens' rights from foreign and domestic threats. Period. The 17th Amendment moved us radically away from the Republic toward a pure democracy, a government the founders feared greatly because it devolves into warring camps such as we have now. So what can we do? Up with the sovereign states. Everyone thinks the federal government has gotten too big. Well, everyone but the power consolidators. The great population thinks so. A 2017 Gallup poll showed that 67% view big government as our biggest threat. Here's a way to restore the republic once envisioned. The National Governors Association is a natural place to start. Here, the individual states already counsel together to establish a forum that could bring to fill the void created by the 17th Amendment. The states have no authority in the federal Congress, but the NGA could function as a Confederate Senate until the states regain their full voice there. In fact, they're already speaking louder. States are coming back online. States have told the U.S. government that they are fed up with the constant violations of the 10th Amendment. How? There is a significant rash of the states, even localities, saying, no, not in my backyard. That was exactly the strategy James Madison recommended in Federalist Papers 46, when he said the federal government oversteps its bounds and commits unwarrantable acts or even actions that are just unpopular. The states should refuse to cooperate with officers of the Union. Jefferson held the same opinion. The states are not writing U.S. law, but they are asserting their sovereignty through Madison's nullification method. State legislatures are either ignoring federal mandates or writing laws that countermand them. The states say no. The recent nullification movement started in 1996 when California voters approved Proposition 2015. The Compassionate Use Act authorizes possession, cultivation, and the use of marijuana for limited medical use despite absolute federal prohibition. The federal government has no duty to ban a plant. If you doubt this, ask yourself why it took a constitutional amendment to ban alcohol. But despite federal law and a Supreme Court opinion supporting it, that a single act of California defiance has grown. Today, 33 states have legalized legal marijuana, and 10 states have legalized the plant completely. With so many states refusing to enforce federal prohibition, it is unenforceable. This is nullification in practice and effect. It can be done with the Patriot Act too, my friends. Remember that. And the Domestic Security Act. I will continue on here. States have applied nullification in other areas of federal overreach. In healthcare, the Federal Reserve's unconstitutional monopoly in our money by declaring precious metals as legal tender, food regulations, gun control, the EPA, education schemes, and more. These are various levels of state sovereignty over federal officers. There is no objection, for example, to state officers arresting federal agents for breaking state law. Kicked out of the Senate, the states are recovering their sovereignty the best they can. How the states can regain their voice? The NGA, already acting as a Confederate U.S. Senate in a substantial way, caused it use power of unity and move the states from their present position as rebellious children equals with the general U.S. population. The U.S. House of Representatives. What could be more natural and thus easier than for the states working, though, the NGA to ratify a U.S. constitutional amendment that undid the 17th? It could be done by rescinding the 17th or by rescinding and replacing it with a better idea. Either way, each state should assure that their senator serves at the pleasure of that state government. Why? So state represents itself and therefore rights and powers of the citizens of that state. This tends to make the individual citizen feels he is losing some of his voice in the U.S. Congress, but the fact that he has already lost that voice, putting the states back in the Senate actually restores its loss. It makes perfect sense that the state must defend the rights the people have delegated to it. A glance at the delegation of your rights sidebar will confirm these ideas. Just remove the red marks and see the results. All hell will break loose when it comes for the state to regain their seats in the Senate, as well as all hell will break loose. So what? States legislatures can band together and pass the amendment whether or not a majority of the general population support it. The power consolidators will raise Cain. They've had great success since the states were taken down, and they will not give up the ground they won with a huge, blistering, frightening, and threatening fusillade of rhetoric and legislative attempts to thwart the careers of the United States for putting themselves back in the position of power they first won in the Constitutional Convention so long ago. The power consolidators will scream. Here are a few of their favorite protests, along with simple, powerful answers. Protest. You just want to go back to the old, obsolete ways? Answer. You agree that the government is too big. Well, we want power to the states where it once was. That will take care of it. What's obsolete about that? And this is what the person has to say. The 17th Amendment was passed because there are too many problems the way the senators were selected. You want to go back to that? And this I go, that's right. There are some problems, but in exchange, we got much bigger problems. Do you want to keep these? Pure democracy always devolves into a warring camps we have in our country today. We want our republic back. Under the Constitution, senators were often bought and sold by big money people in the states. So, did they get any better? What about the deadlocks the six legislators experienced in choosing their senators? Delaware had one senator for a while. Are you saying the states can't fix that? Utah had that problem. They fixed it very quickly. It would be completely upset. To establish procedures in the Senate. Wonderful. We have spent more than 2 centuries trying to unify the application of the law for all citizens to ensure that every citizen across the great land has equal protection of the law. When you put divisive influences of the states back into the Senate, you will undo all the good that has been done. It's just insane. I agree that the federal government must treat all citizens with equal protection and equal justice. However, the citizens of the U.S. are very diverse, and their wants and needs are also very diverse. For example, one town, most citizens want to see the Ten Commandments displayed on plaque on the courthouse lawn, while another town, the majority, would rather not see that there. So why not let each town decide what will be on their courthouse lawn? The founders wanted every issue to be administered at the lowest possible jurisdiction. This is true and correct celebration of diversity. Letting state governments represent their counties and cities in Congress can achieve that. Will you see that a restored Senate will gradually move the federal government out of state and local issues? Absolutely. That's a real good synopsis by Jackson Pemberton. He does physics. He graduated with honors in physics and mathematics with an MBA class. Very good. I think and he's right. And people should know this, because a lot of folks say, oh, centralization and this and that, and not trusting the government. Of course, he never trusts them. But one of the areas he can bring back the separation of powers, man. And that's why when you see what happened in California, and even with the Brady Law, Federalist Papers 46 described that too, when Judge Rawls made that decision in favoring Sheriff Prince and Mack versus the United States. Yes, it's being reactivated, folks. Don't say the 10th Amendment's dead. It never has. It was dormant. But now it's being re-implemented. Time and time again, we are seeing things that is unbelievably beautiful. I always believe, too, even Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution talks about sound money, gold and silver coins. They can use gold and silver coins. And they can make it, too. You know what? And that's legit. We don't need the Federal Reserve. We don't need centralization. It's nothing more than a monumental lie. Okay? And that's one of those areas you gotta look at. See things more complex than what the clowns tell you. These bobbleheads who sold their rear ends to all these big, pathetic cartels. That's why we have to follow the Constitution, the organic version. Hey, the 18th Amendment got nullified. We can do the 17th as well on the state level. I think that would be pretty damn fair, I would say. Because it's the truth, my friends. It can be done. Nullification is a great remedy. I'll go back in a little bit later on decentralization. However, I'm going to do a couple of posts from couple of links, reports from the Freedom Outpost. Pretty damn cool here. It's by Daniel Greenfield. It's a commentary. It says here the ADL took $1.75 billion from a funder of the alt-left anti-Semitism. Now it's ignoring alt-left hate. Mr. Greenfield wrote this. It says here on February 2017, Juan Thompson, a former reporter for the alt-left hate site, The Intercept, phoned in a bomb threat to the ADL. The bomb threat targeting the ADL's headquarters was one of a number of threats that he, disgraced activists and journalists, had made to a variety of Jewish organizations. On November 2017, the ADL tweeted its gratitude to the Omidyar Network, the foundation behind The Intercept, for donating $250,000 in seed money to set up a Silicon Valley center fighting online hate. Another $1.5 million would be provided by Omidyar to the Center of Technology and Society. After being targeted and harassed by one of the Intercept's failed bigots, the ADL responded by getting into bed with his employer, a leading financer of the alt-left anti-Semitism on the internet. Thompson's hateful threats against Jewish institutions have been downplayed as the side effects of stalking an ex-girlfriend. But this glib dismissal doesn't address his choice to terrorize Jewish institutions or how the hateful culture of the alt-left hate site he had worked for had contributed to his bigotry. The ADL has chosen to ignore the subject and almost alt-left anti-Semitism on the internet. 50 years ago, extremists were hiding behind hoods and burning crosses. Today, they are hiding behind avatars and burning up Twitter. I'm grateful to Amadar Network for his generous support and thankful that the board members are sharing their expertise to help us put a stop to online hate. Jonathan Greenblatt, the Obama vet who now heads the ADL, cheered. Oh, man. Ginos on parade, right? Implicit in Greenblatt's reference to hoods and burning crosses, but the ADL and its new center of technology and society will be targeting online hate from the alt-right, not the alt-left. Greenblatt's tweet thanking a funder of the alt-left anti-Semitism for his support mentioned hate, not anti-Semitism. And there's a good reason for that. Amadar's The Intercept on the front line of whitewashing defending alt-left anti-Semitism when CNN ends his relationship with Mark Lamont Hill after his defense of Muslim violence against Jews. The Intercept's Glenn Greenwald defended Hill and claimed that he has been a victim of right-wing defenders of Israel who had somehow construed as anti-Semitic his defense of killing Jews. Greenwald obviously doesn't believe that killing Jewish men and women and children in order to ethnically cleanse from a region and establish Islamic State under which non-Muslims would have few legal rights is anti-Semitic, as he had previously also defended Hamas and Hezbollah. It's interesting because anything that's considered Middle Eastern descent are Semites. Something to think about, folks, okay? Hezbollah and Hamas, Greenwald had said, are devoted to protect their citizens against the state of Israel, and yet it is criminals in the United States to do anything that is deemed to be supportive of Hezbollah and Hamas. The Intercept has a history of reporting on Israel that is little better than Hamas propaganda. During the past conflict with Hamas, the Intercept ran a Greenwald rant claiming that militants in Gaza are nothing more than residents who take up arms to defend their homes against an invading and occupying army. A non-Greenwald Intercept article declared Gaza has the right to invade Israel. But the Intercept doesn't just limit itself for supporting the murder of Jews in Israel by anti-Semitic religious and racial supremacists, a foul habit that the left justifies as anti-Zionism, not anti-Semitism. Well, the difference between Judaism and Zionism. But the truth of the matter is, folks, you got to look at this. Who gets screwed the most? The rank and file. We'll continue on here. The Intercept has defended anti-Semitism by Corbynites in the British Labour Party attempted to provide cover for the anti-Semitic leadership of the Women's March and Keith Ellison's past support for Farrakhan. Sean King, who has written for the Intercept, has defended Farrakhan and attacked Jewish critics in his own movement, objected to the anti-Semitism of Farrakhan and Tamika Mallory. But much of this hate took place online, especially on social media, with little response to the ADL. The ADL's funding by the Audemars Network may help explain why it has been so militant in the fight against alt-right anti-Semitism and yet so completely absent in resisting alt-left anti-Semitism. Hey, as long as you get the money, that's okay. The ADL could have argued that it took Audemars' money, despite its problematic funding of online hate and attempt to push it to good use. But the Persian Silicon Valley billionaire is far too savvy to just hand out cash. The seven-figure giant, after a bomb threat aimed at the ADL by his former people, one of his former people, might have been seen as a public relations stunt. But Pierre Audemars always has an agenda. Audemars' money set up the Center of Technology and Society using the ADL brand to provide cover for a deeply disturbing program for potentially automated online censorship. And the board of tech experts named by the ADL's Greenblatt includes at least one figure with anti-Semitic connections. The Center on Technology and Society is supposed to provide guidelines to online companies for the crackdown on hate. and yet the board of tech experts includes Eli Pariser, the board president of MoveOn, and a co-founder of Avaz radical left groups with their own histories of anti-Semitism. Both organizations are notorious for their Soros backing, which is Open Source Foundation is one of them, their hostility to Israel and friendliness to hate. Avaz has promoted BDS and teams up with the JVP, an anti-Israel hate group that hosted murderous terrorists and anti-Israel activists who claimed Jews drank Christian blood, and republished the bizarre claim that the Zionists who created Israel and still run it to descend from the Khazars. Interesting there. I know there's a lot of claims on that as well, but I say, folks, do your own homework on this. It's very intriguing. Including an avid figure on his board puts the ADL at 2 degrees of separation from the ugliest forms of anti-Semitism, at 1 degree of separation from support for anti-Semitic violence, and 0 degrees of separation from BDS and other anti-Israel activism that whitewash violence against Jews. Meanwhile, the pre-Greenblatt ADL has objected to MoveOn's increasingly anti-Semitic campaign against Senator Lieberman. It even dispatched a letter to Eli Pariser, who now sits on the CTS board, above comments on his forum referring to him as a Jew Lieberman. That might be dismissed as old news, except that in 2015, MoveOn has campaigned against Senator Charles Schumer on the Iran deal by accusing them of neoconservative sympathies and declaring our country doesn't need another Joe Lieberman in the Senate. I think the Iran deal, people need to start reading it in its entirety and just let you folks know it was never been ratified by the Senate. So actually that whole Iran deal is unconstitutional. Okay, so I'll continue on here. Why did Schumer have in common with Lieberman? Well, they both hate freedom, right? No, they are both obviously Jewish. I disagree. I call them Ginos. The Our Country line had pro-Iran alt-left groups trying to hurl a dual loyalty accusation while wrapped up in the flag. 2 years after issuing an anti-Semitic dog whistle aimed at the top Jewish Democrat for being insufficiently pro-Iran, MoveOn got a seat at the table in deciding what is online hate. The tech advisory members of the ADL's CTS lean to the left. That's not surprising. And while there are anti-Israel voices such as Eli Pariser and Craig Newmark, who has prominently backed the anti-Israel NIF, it is hard to find any equally strong pro-Israel voices. And that raises serious questions about CTS agenda, incredibly, especially as it seeks to automate online censorship. At the heart of the CTS is an alliance with UTC Berkeley D-Lab to automate free hate speech using machine learning, considering UC Berkeley's problem with anti-Semitism as an odd choice to have its faculty and students put in charge of determining what hate speech is, let alone allowing its algorithm to be potentially used automatically flag and censor speech they disagree with, especially the Senate, especially as the censorship of pro-Israel activists on social media continues to be growing concern, and anti-Semitic tweets, as well as comments on Daily Chaos and the Huffington Post, along with other alt-left sites, are not receiving the same scrutiny that CTS online hate index is aiming to the right. The ADL, the Greenblatt ADL, has all been too eager to rush into alliances with the anti-Israel network to pay attention to the concerns of the Jewish community activists, even while the ADL has announced Canary Mission, the Jewish civil rights group, which turns up anti-Semitism on social media, including a recent case of Lara Collab, an anti-Israel doctor who threatened to poison Jews through investigative research, is quite comfortable with wholesale machine learning censorship overseen by the left. While Canary Mission has highlighted anti-Semitism on social media by anti-Israel activists, the ADL's online hate index appear to have little interest in addressing alt-left anti-Semitism, and includes the involvement of figures whose organization had become notorious hubs of an alt-left anti-Semitism. As online hate by the alt-left continues to grow, the ADL has not only failed to fight, it ignored it and minimized while making common cause with the funders and the leaders of the anti-Semitic alt-left. Well, I am not too surprised at all, and I'll be very sincere to you folks. The Anti-Defamation League is nothing more than a deception. I learned that pretty damn quick, 30 years ago to be exact. I was never fond of that organization. Yeah, almost 30 years, so about 21. Almost 20 and a half years to be exact. And you know what? I never had a guilt conscience over it because I knew what these clowns were about. They're like the Ku Klux Klan, a bunch of her conformists on parade, bunch of clowns in the circus. And the question is this, because I remember the ADL, Anti-Defamation League, and the late Aaron Zellman from Jews for Preservation of Firearms Ownership he declared a challenge at Anti-Defamation League on militias, gun control, and Judaism. And they backed down pretty quick. And plus, the Anti-Defamation League's main headquarters is where? UN Plaza in the heart of New York. Very New World Order platform indeed. But always going to be biases. But I get a big kick out of it because even myself in the Intercept, I see the good and bad. And don't get me wrong, some of the stuff even Greenwald did was good. So I can't knock him completely. But like I always tell all my listeners, always observe responsibly. But one thing I know for sure, there's always a bunch of double dealing going on. And the Anti-Defamation League are nothing more than operated by Ginos, which stands for Jew in name only. Okay? And I'm not being anti-Semitic either. I gotta do another one here. Speaking of the UN, this came out as well. It came out yesterday by Tim Brown, Freedom Outpost. H.R. 204, the one bill that needs to become law in 2019. If you are with me, then you know that the U.S. needs to get out of the wasteful, anti-American, anti-Christian United Nations. Once again, a bill is being reintroduced to Congress just to do that. Get us out of the UN. H.R. 204, the American Sovereignty Restoration Act of 2019, was introduced by Representative Mike Rogers, Republican from Alabama, the current ranking member of the House Committee on Homeland Security this month. Was referred to the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, but don't expect it just to pass with ease, especially with the anti-American Islamist Ilhan Omar, Democrat from Minnesota, on a committee. Hey, I'll tell you this, my friends, even if you folks that are Muslims and you guys are anti-globalism, if she does this, call her out. Don't hesitate. The legislation would repeal the United Nations Participation Act of 1945, the United States Environment Program Participation Act of 1973, and the United Nations Headquarters Agreement Act. Additionally, the bill seeks to eliminate both assessed and voluntary contributions to the UN by the U.S., terminate all funds of peacekeeping operations, and eliminate the UN from U.S. property, as well as revoke any status of diplomatic immunity for any officer or employee of the United Nations, including any organ, specialized agency or commission or other formally affiliated body of the United Nations, or any representative or officer or employee or any mission to the United Nations of any foreign government. It would also repeal the following: the United States membership and participation in the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, the United States participation in the World Health Organization, the U.S. involvement in UN conventions and agreements. Should the bill be passed into law, it would become effective 2 years after its enactment, which is frankly seemed far too long to enact. Congressman Rogers issued a press release saying, "One of my first priorities as the new Congress was to make this bill was reintroduced. The United Nations is a disaster, and our country bankrolls over 20% of its annual budget. The UN continues to attack our greatest ally, Israel. They continue to attack the ideas like the Second Amendment. President Trump has done his part to rein in the UN's continual attacks on American sovereignty, but it's time we do more. I'll say this too. If you one thing I can say this too about Israel. Like I said, I don't hate them or anything like that, but they have really rogue elements in their government too. So you gotta be really careful about that. So we'll have to disagree on that, but we'll just continue on here. Alex Newman of the New American Rights. The legislation has introduced in Congress for decades. However, the current president publicly expressed hostility to globalism and has oft stated support for U.S. sovereignty to make the issue especially salient right now. Salient, yep. In Congress and the administration, as well as among everyday Americans, anti-UN sentiment is surging. Even some Democrats are fed up with the UN criticism of Israel. Advocates of the measure are urging Americans to contact the representative senators and the White House in support. Indeed, Trump has already announced that the United States will withdraw from or defund a vast collection of UN agencies and programs. Among the most high profile so far, the disgraced UN Human Rights Council, the UN Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, or its acronym for that is UNESCO, the UN Migration Compact, the UN Paris Agreement on Climate, the UN Relief and Work Agency, and more. He has also repeatedly taught the UN that Americans reject ideology of globalism, and that Americans, not the UN or other foreign bodies, will be in charge of governing America. Representative Rogers, one of the leading advocates of getting the United States out of the UN in Congress today, has said that many of his constituents in East Alabama agree with his position, that American involvement in the globalist organization should end immediately, calling the UN an efficient bureaucracy and a complete waste of American tax dollars. The congressman noted that it works against America's interests around the world and continues to attack its rights as U.S. citizens. Another regular co-sponsor of the bill, Representative Thomas Massey, Republican of Kentucky, told the New American that there are many reasons why the U.S. government should get out. The best thing that you can say about the United Nations is mostly ineffective and a waste of money, said Congressman Massey, who campaigned for an exit from the UN after the British people voted for a Brexit from the European Union. That is a big thing you can say about it. So I'm glad they are somewhat ineffective, but I don't like the way we waste the money. But there are many other concerns and reasons why he thinks America should get out. It's full of dictators, and it's also something that I don't think our sovereign government should defer to, he explained. For instance, a lot of these foreign relation bills that come in front of us in Congress and the whereas clause, they might say, whereas the UN has said this, or the UN decided this, now therefore it be resolved. Well, that's almost an automatic no for me, because why do I have to defer to the United Nations and for a sovereign country? And you can listen to interviews from Congressman Massey below, and contact your representatives and senators in support of co-sponsoring and passing H.R. 204 to get the U.S. out of the UN in the White House, and introducing, co-sponsoring, and passing a companion bill in the Senate. Let them know that you too reject the ideology of globalism and want Congress to likewise do the same by voting in favor of terminating U.S. membership in the United Nations. Yes, I do agree with that. And one thing you got to look at too, folks, after that's done, you better be paying attention about there's got to be another form of a New World Order, and there's claim that even Israel will be centralized with Solomon's Temple. Will be the central epicenter of the planet. So if you're very against one world order government, yes, get out of the UN and stay sovereign permanently. Even foreign influences are dangerous, according with George Washington's farewell address and Phillips Papers 2-5, written by John Jay. You can all read it themselves. It's very self-explanatory. It's called foresight, folks. I'm against the United Nations or any form of one world government. And I have no shame of saying that, because it may sound good, but the fine print is horrendous. We always got to remain vigilant. Yeah, we can do trades with nations all over the world. I don't find anything wrong with that. When it comes to stuff like the United Nations, GATT, World Bank, International Monetary Fund, they're all a sham. So my friends, you got to always look at these in the bigger picture, because the truth of the matter is, if we don't, then they try to lock us into one global technocracy. So yes, support H204 and tell your congressman this immediately. If they don't like it, tell them to step down, because you're tired of them contaminating space as well. All right, well, I'll do one more here. Pretty cool. Came out a couple days ago. And it's from Mises Institute. Yeah, it came out yesterday. Decentralization is a solution to the government shutdown. Ray Mackin writes, the partial shutdown with the federal government has helped, perhaps more than other recent political events. To illustrate some of the biggest problems that come with centralizing ever larger number of government activities with a single centralized institution. Were the U.S. government more decentralized, we now be facing a nationwide we not be now facing a nationwide system-like failure that has continued to cripple the private sector in many ways. Held hostage by a shuttered regulatory state, the federalization of resources and regulatory power over the past century has created a situation in which numerous industries depend on licensing and regulatory approvals from federal regulators to function. And yet, thanks to the shutdown, these industries can do little when facing a federal government that imposes mandates but won't provide the agency services necessary to allow agencies to function under those mandates. For example, as the Washington Post reported, those areas where the federal government has a large regulatory footprint, such as Alaska, are at the mercy of politicians thousands of miles away. Most, 61% of Alaska, is government land managed by 5 different federal agencies, according to the Congressional Research Service. The states maintain industries including fishing, tourism, and oil and gas depend on the day-to-day actions of federal government and regulators. The fisheries have so far avoided major disruption despite a few close calls. Most boats are still getting by on licenses and inspections which occurred before the shutdown, but time is running out. Major commercial boats are required to carry on board observers to monitor each catch, but when they return from a trip, those observers must be debriefed by the National Marine Fisheries Services, and it's not holding debriefings during the shutdown. Alaska is an extreme example, but other states that also have sizable federal ownership of land, which includes most western U.S. states, are also affected. Nationwide states with coastal states that depend on the smooth functioning of federal regulation of fisheries and natural resources as well. And it doesn't end with natural resources. With the Tax and Trade Bureau shut down, breweries can't ship beer. That leaves an entire industry up in the air, and small craft brewers are affected the most. As the shutdown continues, more of these workers can expect their paycheck to eventually dry up due to lack of revenue. Meanwhile, the FTC, the SEC, and the SEC are all partially shut down. Some anti-government activists might look at this and say, great, we don't need those agencies anyway. But here's the problem. Although those agencies' staff members may be staying at home, that doesn't mean the private sector is no longer subject to the mandates and regulations to those agencies oversee. Private companies must still obtain all usual licenses and regulatory approvals from federal agencies. It's just that federal agencies are no longer available to make their approvals to answer questions. That's hardly something to celebrate. In short, the usual federal roadblocks exist to stymie the private sector, except now there are even fewer ways to get around those roadblocks. What's even worse, that this problem is nationwide. Where are these regulatory powers and agencies decentralized out of the hands of the federal government? Of course, we wouldn't be looking at the nationwide problem. were a single state to experience a shutdown, something that is extremely rare at the state level. By the way, we wouldn't now be facing a nationwide problem, which would whole industries are facing crippling regulatory bottlenecks. Problems would be limited into single states, and those states were prone to shutdowns or other regulatory bottlenecks would see an exodus of industry and capital. Nor we will be facing a situation in which 800,000 federal employees nationwide are currently unpaid. That is a problem that has been made by larger in scope by the centralization of government power. The federal government has too many issues on its plate. Another reason to decentralize is to end the situation in which government shutdowns are more likely due to the broad scope and complexity of the federal budget and federal responsibility. In the United States, the federal government's prerogatives have expanded over the past century to include everything from old age pensions to highways to healthcare regulations to farming subsidies and much more. There has been added on top of the more traditional federal prerogatives of foreign policy. It is only natural that the likelihood of shutdowns would increase as the number of areas for political conflicts increases. After all, the current shutdown does not come out of only a dispute over a border wall. It is a larger issue that stems from the fact that the Democrats want to use the wall's potential funding for a myriad of other uses. And the larger the federal government has grown, the possible target for government spending has grown even larger. Moreover, the issue of building border walls was not always a federal issue. Prior to the late 19th century, state governments were the governments that dealt with the issue of limiting migrants and flow. Although some conservatives now create ornate legal arguments in attempts to prove immigration, a separate issue from naturalization. That's on Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution. You look that up, folks. Has always been the job of the federal government. The actual historical experience makes it clear that federalization of immigration policies is itself a later innovation. So we're now left with the federal government where the president and the legislature can argue endlessly over every little thing under the sun. It is the federal government's job to control and fund everything from cancer research to national parks, and it's only a matter of time we endure a political impasse over one of the countless issues being discussed. Nor is it just scope of issues. The sheer size and scope of the United States is itself problematic. The U.S. is so large and culturally, demographically diverse that significant disagreements over how federal prerogatives ought to be used are unavoidable. A less fragile and more responsive system grows out of a decentralized political system that allows for diversity and policies that affect travel, education, poverty relief, and more. If education policy, for instance, is decided at the state level, we can be sure we'll never see a federal shutdown over fundings of schools. It simply becomes a non-issue at the federal level. A solution lies in decentralization. The solution lies in removing from the federal government its authority over such a wide range of issues to allow diversity and localism in government. This naturally includes welfare programs, public lands, airport security, law enforcement, military land forces, immigration, and the regulatory state. As it is, American governmental institutions being so dependent on federal funding and regulatory oversight are now fragile, bloated, unresponsive, prone to political bottlenecks. You now see this at work. The problems we now encounter with the shutdown ought to be placed squarely at the feet of those who have called endless or ever greater levels of federal control over state and local communities, while centralizing both financial and regulatory power within a single institution. Not everything needs to turn into a nationwide systemic problem. When the federal government encounters a political impasse, we ought to take steps now to limit the damage the feds can do. I have to say, he is right. Decentralization is the answer, my friends. Like I said before, there's too much Washington waste. district of criminals. We don't. That's why in the United States, when 13 colonies became states, united as one. They got the Constitution, republic, not a democracy, and is against centralization. One of those areas, folks. That's why we need to keep that alive. The 10th Amendment is a great remedy. As we got form of decentralization is a very good example. So, like I said before, get rid of all the garbage and bring stuff that's more effective. And let the states do the rest. That's what the 10th Amendment is all about. And that is it. I thank everyone for listening. Plus, feel free to download and share us throughout your social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, or you say something that's interesting you may want to check out, whatever you do, please share your correspondence with Quorum. Furthermore, I will leave all my social media sites and email addresses on my Spreaker page. Okay? Once again, the truck coming by. Thank you for your time. But always remember that the demoniac resistance healthy for the soul can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves, keep on spreading love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.